Now we're going to look at how to figure out where the x-intercept or the zeros are for a particular quadratic equation based just on the equation itself. Okay, and in order to do that, what we actually need to do is we need to factor um, the quadratic equation from standard form into what we're going to call factored form or intercept form. And we've done this before. We did this when we were factoring. In fact, you did it without even really knowing. And so, for example, let's start off by factoring this example here on the left. Again, we've got a trinomial, and we know that we need two numbers. One has to multiply to positive 3, and the other has to add to positive 4. And so if we look at 3 and 1, that happens to meet the criteria. So in the equation, y is equal to x plus 3, then x plus 1. Okay? And so we've just factored that quadratic equation, but we haven't found the zeros quite yet. And if we want to figure out the zeros, we're trying to figure out what is the value of y. So we know that the value of y is going to be 0, but what values of x allow for this to be 0? So we're actually looking at both of these pieces. And when we're looking at both of those two binomials, we know that since the y value has to equal 0, the value of either one of these two binomials has to be 0, because 0 times any number is going to give us 0. So if I did, for example, y is equal to negative 3 plus 3 times negative 3 plus 1, I'd get 0 over here, and it doesn't even matter what I get over here, although it would be negative 2. Well, 0 times negative 2 gives me 0. And if I also was to do y is equal to negative 1 plus 3 and negative 1 plus 1, this part equals 0, this part equals positive 2, and 0 times positive 2 is also 0. So both of those criteria would satisfy, would end up with a y value of being 0. So if we want to convert standard form into, so once we've converted standard form into factored form, our zeros are simply the opposite value, or the zeros for x are the opposite value of what's already written here. So we notice that we've got x plus 3. Well, if x plus 3 is one of the two binomials, then negative 3 is one of those zeros. And if we have x plus 1, then the x value is actually going to be negative 1. So our zeros are actually negative 3 and positive 1. If we have an example over here, again, we've got x squared minus or plus 2x minus 15. Again, if we just do our MA chart, we're looking for two numbers that are going to multiply to negative 15 and add to positive 2. Well, I know that negative 15 and positive 1 is going to give me negative 14. Negative 5 and positive 3 are going to give me an answer of negative 2. But positive 5 and negative 3 will give me, if I add those two things together, I get positive 2. So in this instance, my factored form of this quadratic equation is going to be x plus 5 times x plus 2. Okay, and so my zeros are going to be the same number, or for my zeros for x are going to be the same number that's in the binomial, just with the opposite sign. So my zeros are actually going to be negative 5 and negative 2. Oh, I'm sorry, I've made an error. I need to go back. So my equation, this should be x minus 3. I apologize. So my zeros are actually going to be, again, still negative 5, and in this instance, positive 3. So those are my two zeros for that particular equation. Again, you'll notice that the 0 is simply the opposite number that's in here. Okay, and because the 0 is just the opposite of what's in there, from an equation, it's very easy to find what the zeros are. Okay. So if we take a look, we've got another example. Here we have y is equal to x squared minus 3x. Now, again, this is actually a trinomial. It's just missing the c value at the end. So if we go through and we want to factor this, we end up looking for two numbers that are going to multiply to 0, but they have to add to negative 3. So when any two numbers to multiply to 0, one of them has to be 0. And those two numbers to add together to be at negative 3, the other has to be negative 3. So in this instance, my factored form is going to be x plus 0 and x minus 3. Okay, so in this particular instance, I'm going to get two zeros. One of them is 0, and the other one is going to be positive 3. So if you were to graph that, you'd end up having 1, 0 right here, because the y value is 0. The other one's at positive 3. Okay, and I know that my a value, based on this, a is going to equal positive 1. So my parabola is going to open up, which means that it'll look something like this. Okay, so my parabola is going to be moving up in that direction.